The reason they like reading my stuff is that I've always got real life examples to prove what I'm saying.
There's a lot of good people that listen to this podcast.
Other than God and my family, deer hunting would be next in line on my list of priorities.
From the bottom of our hearts, it's just fantastic and awesome to have the support that you guys are giving.
People ask me about expandable broadheads and love swings.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Well, welcome everyone to the Chasing Giants podcast, brought to you by Osseo Gear. Don Higgins is on the line. I'm Terry Peer. It's episode 106, and we're at the end of December already, end of February already, buddy.
Yeah, spring is not far away.
The last week we had a live event up in Shipshewana. We had, good grief, I think one night we had 500, 600, 700 people there. The next night, almost as many. And then the great debate with you and Tony LaPratt had a huge crowd there. What's your thinking back on that? Any takeaways from you?
No, not real. I mean, I think there's a couple times I could have probably been a little more aggressive with Tony, but it went well. I mean, like I said, I was extremely blessed to even be a part of that they would even think of including me in something like that. So, I think people got to see the difference in our personalities, the difference in our styles as far as management. And, I hope everyone left entertained anyway.
Yeah, it was a good time. Were you shocked at how many people actually ended up showing up?
That's the biggest crowd I've ever spoken in front of. I think, Leon said there was about 2,500 they thought there.
Yeah.
So
it was all for charity. The proceeds or profits from that event, they sold ticket sales for it. Were split. You picked Lester's Feet. Tony picked another charity, and they're going to be split. We don't know how much money we made yet, but the cool thing about the whole weekend is the Thursday before the event, or Tuesday before the event, excuse me, we found a local family up there that was a widow that had a kid just diagnosed with cancer. So all the money that event raised was going to stay in that community. And we don't know how much we made from the great debate, but just at the booth alone, about $4,200 was dropped off in donations. So we're going to be able to do a lot of good work with that family. And it was just a fun event. We have so many close friends that are from that area, but good grief, we have people driving from Pennsylvania, Iowa. I mean, I can't even remember how many states drove over there to see that.
Missouri, Ohio, Michigan. There's probably a couple more we're forgetting, but yeah, they came from a long ways. They actually had to postpone the thing in 30 minutes. It was 30 minutes late because there was people lined up for 400 yards outside to get in.
Yeah. So it's like anything else. I'm sure the promoters will learn and optimize and get more proficient with crowds that big. It was not expected, but the interesting thing is that's really hard for you and I to get our arms around is how big this thing has gotten and how many followers and listeners we really do have. And I think if I look at the analytics of downloads, they've gone way up since we've started doing video. I think that's captured a different market. We're still maintaining our platforms with MTech for our Amish folks that call in. But all the platforms together have just grown exponentially. And I know we have a lot of new listeners. I'm going to put you on the spot here. I didn't prep you on this, but, we kind of learn as we go with this thing, but kind of give a little preview. What is this podcast about? What was your original vision of it? And what makes us a little bit different? I mean, we got a lot of new followers here that have never heard the little bit of this spiel. So take a minute and talk.
Well, I think the original goal was I do a lot of consulting jobs across the country. Have the Whitetail Master course here. Both of those are fairly expensive. And I've spoken many times on here, Terry, about how I started out dirt poor. When my wife and I were first married, I mean, we didn't have two pennies to rub together. And um, I don't ever want to forget, the folks that are not as fortunate as some of the others. And this podcast was a way to put some good information out to those folks, everyone really, but it gives those folks who maybe can't afford a consultation, maybe they don't even own land, maybe they're hunting public land, but it gives them some good solid information. There's a lot of garbage out there on the internet. Now, there's some good stuff on the internet too, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that from the things I see on the internet, I would say at least half, over half, is just pure trash and inaccurate. So, I just wanted a platform to give some good information, but at the same time, I also feel that the hunting industry has lacked good role models. Now, that's not saying there was none at all, because there is some good role models in the hunting industry, but we could use a few more. And boy, I never thought of myself as a role model, I'll tell you that, by any means. But as I've gotten older and matured, I've got my priorities in order, I think. And I can relate to a 20-year-old guys who don't yet have their priorities in order, or even guys in their 30s or 40s that are, still coming to grips with, life in general. And, I wanted to use the podcast to share kind of our story, our Christian faith, and, let the listeners know that it doesn't matter what you've done in the past, how bad you are, we're all sinners. And you don't have to listen to me very long on here. And you're probably going to hear a word slip out here or there that some people don't want to hear. And I'm far from perfect. But, what I've seen with this podcast more than anything is, well, then you started the Lester's Feet. And that was just a fantastic idea that this podcast kind of serves as the sounding board for Lester's Feet, if you will. And basically, we're using the platform to bless others. We're blessing deer hunters with good, solid information, but we're using our platform to also those families who are just devastated with a sick child or whatever. We're using this to help those folks. And what I think is really cool about it is the fact that we're taking the money that we're raising is basically all coming for the most part from the hunting industry. And the families that we're helping are basically just about all connected to our listeners in one way or another. And I've often said that if you want to be blessed, be a blessing. And if you're a blessing to someone else, God is going to bless you somehow. And that doesn't mean he's going to make you rich. It doesn't mean he's going to make you famous and drop all kinds of nice toys in your lap. Just the fact that we get out of bed every morning and are able to, put our shoes on by ourselves, and the fact that we wake up in a warm house and we walk into our kitchen and there's food in the refrigerator, that makes us blessed. And, I've said it before that if you think about it, at any given moment, right now, as we're recording this, there is a family somewhere in a hospital room with a sick child, and that child's not going to see tomorrow. So no matter how bad we got it or think we've got it, there's people right now in a whole lot worse shape than we are. And, sometimes you just got to sit back and realize how blessed you really are. And that's kind of what this podcast has become. I don't know that we started out that direction, but it sure, God's opened the doors and made it happen. And, you naming the nonprofit after your grandfather, I think is just absolutely fantastic, because my grandfather had a major influence on my life too. When I was younger, he passed away when I was in my late 20s, but to this day, I think of him all the time. And I hope he's looking down with a big smile on his face and seeing some of the things that I've been able to do. The farm I live on today, was once his. He lived there most of his life, and yeah, I could just ramble on and on about what this podcast has done and what it means to me today.
Well, we've come up with kind of a slogan / mission statement / I don't even know what you want to call it, but we've tried from the very beginning, even though sponsors invest in this podcast, we really want this to be about the hunting community, not the hunting industry. And I think about, the story in the New Testament where, Jesus took 5 loaves of bread and fed 5,000 people. And what I try to realize for myself is, even though we have sponsors that are investing in this, we're taking a little bit from the hunting industry and really serving the hunting community. And that's both with information, and I can't tell you, it's so many messages every day of people that just say, thanks for what you're doing. It's helped me do something else that's good, or what have you. And if we wanted to do something for ourselves, this probably wouldn't be it. But the fact that God's opened up the doors for us to talk about deer hunting, maybe give some advice about specifically hunting mature bucks, bucks 5.5 years or older, how they're different, some things that you've learned over the years. That's just the tool that unites us. It's kind of like the common bond. But the real thing is inspiring and getting people to do good work everywhere they're at, whether it's through Lester's Feed or their local community. So, this last couple weeks have been extremely busy for us. We've been running like crazy. You were in Michigan right before Shipshewana. You came home, then went back to Ohio and Eastern Pennsylvania. You were almost all the way out to I think you were almost all the way to Philadelphia. You were close to the coast, and then came back home the other day, and then you're packing up this week and going to North Carolina. I know you've been on the road a lot, but what are some takeaways that you had while you were on the road this week? I know I saw this picture. Actually, it was a video. For those listening, Don posted a video on his social media about Nutri-Crave Corn. And I know you had some places that you checked out on your recent trip that had that product in it.
Yeah, right. The big takeaway this week, Terry, was I just can't get over the fantastic people that I meet everywhere I go. I'm serious. These people just treat me so good, and they are just genuine good people. It's we sit down to a meal a lot of times, usually at lunch, and boy, I was at an Amish family's place on Monday, and after we walked the property, we came back in, and the wife had made homemade ice cream and fresh baked cherry pie because she knew cherry pie was my favorite. So she had this. She must have made 4 cherry pies. So we had homemade ice cream, cherry pie, and then she sends me home with a whole fresh, just baked cherry pie. And it's just, every day it's just another fantastic experience for me. But to your point, that Nutri-Crave Corn was on a farm in Ohio, and it was a fairly sizable plot. I'm going to guess there was probably about 4 acres of corn there, and it was actually a client that I was revisiting because they'd bought a couple more properties. And it's actually my 3rd visit with this same client. They were so impressed with what we did with their first property that they just keep calling me every time they buy another property. And so after we looked at their new property, they wanted to show me how that first one had turned out. And we went there, and they had the Nutri-Crave Corn, but they had run out of corn seed before they got the plot all done. And they got some ag corn, and they finished the plot with that ag corn. And I'm telling you what, you could see right to the row where the Nutri-Crave stopped and where the ag corn started, because the deer had just demolished the Nutri-Crave corn. And there was still some left, but you could just see bare cobs everywhere, just littered with tracks. And in that ag corn, it didn't look like a single ear had been touched yet. Now, I'm sure if it gets to the point they run out of the Nutri-Crave, they are going to eat that ag corn, but there is absolutely no doubt they prefer that Nutri-Crave corn. And it was seeing the two side by side in a situation where the deer were just hammering it. There was snow on the ground, and you could just see the tracks everywhere. And I mean, it just brought the point home.
Well, I think that the people that speculate about this product that just can't get it through their head is its drawing power. That's really what this is about. And every situation is different. But if I'm in an area with a lot of big ag row crop that those deer can disperse and go out in it, I have to do something different. We talk on this podcast all the time about your property is a checkerboard, and you have to make your square of that checkerboard different. And corn can be such a vital piece to a diverse food plot system. And having something like Nutri-Crave that's different than all that ag corn can be the one little thing it takes to bring that 5.5-year-old buck to your property in daylight hours to get a crack at it. Not to mention the late season benefit of having the food source.
Yeah, I've started using the hashtag seeing is believing. And if people don't believe it, just buy one bag, just one bag. And we said that for years with our soybeans, our Gen 2 soybeans. The hardest bag for us to sell is the first bag. If we can get somebody to try one bag next to whatever other soybean they're planting, whether it's a forage soybean or some farmer's ag bean, doesn't matter. Just plant one bag of Gen 2 and see the difference. And once they see the difference, well, we got a customer for life.
It's real ironic that when you get on these stupid forums, I stay out of them, but you get on these forums and you have all these people saying that ag seed or whatever is no different. One of the guys that submitted a question in tonight's podcast was one of those ag farmers a couple years ago, and said there wasn't any difference until he tried it. Those guys that always say there's no difference are always the ones that never try it, but that's okay. Whatever.
That's the frustrating part for me is the critics are people that have never tried it.
Yeah.
And
well, one of the things that we keep getting a ton of questions on as it relates to Nutri-Crave, and while we're talking about it, let's just go ahead and knock it out. You've spoken about this multiple times on the Real World platform. It's time to get real, but some people just can't accept the fact that it is not a Roundup Ready product, and they just don't want to, or they don't understand, or I'm not sure why, but they just refuse to go with it because they can't spray that herbicide on it. So talk a little bit about why we are not going Roundup Ready on this.
And, Terry, when we first started testing this corn and just being a conventional non-GMO, we had intentions of making it Roundup Ready, going to the expense of doing that. But what I've seen with soybeans and corn both is deer prefer a non-GMO, a non-genetically modified plant. And if we go and make this Roundup Ready, we're genetically modifying it. We're decreasing the attractiveness to the deer for weed control. And the thing of it is, you don't need to spray Roundup over the top of it to control your weeds. There's other chemicals that'll work. And the key is a residual. You spray a residual when you plant, and if you do a good job with the right residual, you don't have to come back and spray. In fact, when I was up at Scott Fennendall's, he was telling me that he used a product or a chemical called Resicor last year, and he put it down at the time of planting and never came back and sprayed at all, and had corn that was as clean as any ag field you ever seen. I got a jug of that, and I'm going to be testing it as well as a couple other residual products on my farm this year. And if I find one, and I will find one that works really good, when I do, Real World is going to sell it. We do not have a residual chemical this year because until I see it firsthand and know that it works, we're not going to be promoting anything. we do have some chemicals on our website this year for the first time. Simazine and quinclorac for switchgrass, clethodim for clover to kill the grass and clover, and some things like that if anybody's interested. But next year we plan to have a top of the line residual chemical for our Nutri-Crave corn and a different one for our Gen 2 soybeans. We've tried the Enlist approach to combat weeds that are resistant to glyphosate. And from what I've seen just firsthand, now the deer will eat those Enlist beans, no doubt about it. But if they have their choice, they're going to those Gen 2 beans every single time. And I just, the more I see out of it, and that's why we left it a pilot program this year instead of making it a full-fledged product. It was all about the palatability. The deer just did not like it as well as they do the Gen 2. And I think the solution, instead of trying to bring in a different soybean with a different chemical program, is we just need to find the right residual chemical to use on those Gen 2 beans and make that chemical available.
Yeah. I encourage everyone to go to either the Real World site or scroll back through Chasing Giants to It's Time to Get Real. Those episodes, we did a very, very in-depth discussion, even with Dwayne Hopkins there, that we really believe the future, instead of keep altering the genetics of the plants themselves to chase weeds becoming tolerant, eventually the weeds are going to be tolerant to 2,4-D and Liberty and everything else. They're going to continue to adapt. The way to stay in front of this is actually on the residual side. So we don't have any plans for this, but I promise you, you can keep up with weeds if you use a residual. I don't want to say people are lazy. I think they're just uninformed, and they've always done it. They've always done it the Roundup way, and they refuse to deviate their process or what they know. But there are tools out there to do this. And if you want something different that's in a field, on another ridge, or across the fence line, you got to think out of the box. Just putting in the same product of leftover ag seed is going to give you the same option as what the neighbors have.
Yeah, for sure, Terry. We talk about being different, making your property different. And if you're planting the same thing that every farmer in the neighborhood is planting, your property is going to be no different. It's not going to offer the deer anything else that you can't find across the fence.
If you listen to many of our podcasts, you know that minimizing human intrusion is the key to our success. Don Higgins and I have been utilizing the Quiet Cat bike for many years now. As shed season is here, turkey season is not far away. There's no better choice to navigate around your property than a Quiet Cat bike. Go visit Quiet Cat and use the word Higgins to get a free trailer with any Quiet Cat electric bike purchase.
Well, I'm going to shift gears just for a second here. I'm going to share a picture of a buck that we both have a pretty good history with, that you have an interesting update on this deer. The top of the trail camera is cut off, but we wanted to use this picture because it has a time stamp on it. And that's part of the story that makes this so interesting. So I'm going to let you just kind of walk through the background of this buck.
This buck has been on my farm for a long time. For the first until that buck was 6.5 years old, he would always summer off of my farm. I finally figured out where he was summering at and started getting his pictures on a regular basis with the bachelor group. And then he would show up on my farm in mid-October, and he followed that pattern until he was 6.5 years old. And then the year he was 7.5, which was last year, he didn't show up until December. He didn't show up in October. He wasn't here at all during the rut, but I forget what date it was, but it was mid-December. He finally showed up, and I didn't even know he was here until I checked my cameras like a month later, and there he was in December.
Yeah, I
Well,
would have. The plan was for me to come hunt him, and
right.
but we didn't know he had shown back up. We thought he was either gone or something was wrong or what.
Yep. And that would have been the year that I shot Mel,
Yep.
and that he would have been 6.5 that year. So last season he was 7.5, and he didn't show up until December. Then this year he's 8.5 this year, and he didn't show up until February 4th is the date on that picture, and that's why you showed that particular picture. That was the buck coming, and he was coming into the property the same place, coming through the same gap in the fence where I always get his first picture. He's coming from the west, coming into my place, and look at the time. It's 10:30 in the morning. That buck is coming across, but it just so happens that when he's doing this, that coincided with the worst winter storm we've had this year. There's no doubt in my mind that buck came back for food. And it just so happens that I actually found one of his shed antlers a week ago, just laying, in a lane. And that's how I knew he had come back. Well, today I went out and I gathered up the cameras on my place, and I was looking for his picture. And, I was almost through the entire first card, and which was this one that we see here. And I'm almost to the end of it. And I'm like, well, I'm not. I don't even see the buck. And here we are at the end of January, 1st of February, and he isn't here yet. And then boom, February 4th, first picture of him. And I
So
got more pictures of him later on other cameras, but it's just crazy. It shows how little we know about these big bucks and how they can change as they get older. I think this buck, as he's gotten older, he wants less and less to do with other deer. He just he's become a loner. And I got so many deer on my place that he doesn't want to be there.
and we know where this buck is at. You
Uh-huh.
know, and the couple talking points I want you to elaborate a little bit on the story is number one, he always goes the same direction. And we think about deer moving on and off properties as bucks get older and they talk about that range. Your farm might be the center of a hub and have deer that go out from each direction. So they might summer over here and come back in the rut. We talk about yearly patterns, but the things you've done on your property are also making the deer that are over here, when they leave that home core range, to come over here and check. And in this case, this buck needed food in the worst storm there. So guess where he came back to? So
Right.
everybody, I think, misses the boat on managing their property, and they're only worried about, okay, the deer I have here. But in early season and late season, especially, if we do things with our properties like Nutri-Crave Corn that's different, or like bedding structure or stuff like that, those bucks out here on the peripherals that may only show up once or twice a year for the right reasons, that's at the end of their course. So they're coming over there. So we got all these spiders, but we got these spiders over here. And I think it's just fascinating that every picture of this buck that you get leaving the property is with the same gap in the fence. And folks, this is open ag country. So when we know he's going out that gap in the fence, we know exactly where he's going.
Exactly. And what's really interesting, Terry, is these bucks. I've got pictures of all these bucks on my farm, but I've got my cameras on property surrounding my farm for 2 or 3 miles in every direction. And if I get a buck, for example, that say when he leaves my farm, he goes to the west, he never goes to the east. He never goes to the south. He goes to the west. And it's like my property is on the edge of the range of all these bucks. It's not like it's a heart where you get a buck that goes every direction from my place. It's always, when he leaves, he goes one direction. It's just really fascinating. over the years is I've watched a number of bucks do
but
this.
I don't think average hunters have the ability to run as many cameras around the peripheral of what you do on your property to actually see that. You know, even if like on my property, I can't do that here in Kentucky. I don't have access to run cameras around the outside. I can run them on the fence gap like you have it right here, but I have no idea where they're going. And I think that gives you a little bit bigger insight to you know, what these animals are doing. So it's going to be really interesting what happens with this buck next year. You say he'll be 8 years old this coming hunting season?
No, he's 8.5 this year. He'll be 9.5.
He'll be
next
9.5.
year.
And if he shows up, he's going to be on the hit list, isn't he?
Oh, absolutely. Somebody's going to shoot him next year if he's around. I think it's going to take some really bad weather in the late season to get him here. But you know, we're talking about these bucks and my property being like on the edge of their range. I think if another theory I've got is that if you have a really, really good property and it's been established for a while, that these outlying bucks, their home range will be almost egg shaped instead of being circular or whatever. And they will expand their range just a little bit to get your property because it's so good. So in other words, that pointed into that egg, they'll stretch out that home range that direction just a little bit because if your property's so good, it's holding a bunch of does, it's always got quality food. I think you can actually, that's the reason you've got more deer there. The outlying bucks are actually stretching their range to include your property because it's so attractive to them.
Sounds like a good video you need to produce one of these days. All right. Well, we're going to go to our first question of the week. Now, I got a little surprise for you, Don. First, I want you to talk to everybody who's new to the podcast about submitting a question, where they do that, how they do that, and what we do as a thank you back to them if we use their question.
Yeah, go to chasinggiants.com and there's a form there where you can submit your question. If you just try to text Terry or I a question or send us an email, it's impossible for us to keep track of how many we get. We just get way too many. But if you submit it using that form, we can organize it a whole lot better. And that's how you need to do. And if we pick your question, we'll send you a free Chasing Giants t-shirt. So Terry's even designed a new t-shirt that'll be coming out soon. In fact,
we're going to show it right here. The first one off the press came today. We'll
awesome.
have the first batch. We went with a gray one this time. And then you'll have these in your possession. I'm going to hand you the first batch of these to take back from North Carolina. And
awesome.
then we'll have them shipping out. We got to catch up some orders from the people who've already submitted them, but that's my brother-in-law modeling it for me. I didn't think anybody we didn't want anybody seeing me in modeling garb anymore.
Well, got all our current sponsors on the back. You see Osseo Camo there at the top and all our other sponsors. We still have some of the old black shirts in certain sizes. We're out of some sizes, but we'll be depleting that inventory and going to the gray one. So if you submit a question, we send you a t-shirt. You may get a gray one. You may get a black one for a while.
Yep. All right. Well, let's move on to the first listener submitted question of the night. I'll let you read it off here.
All right. The first question comes from Joseph DeMarzik. I hope I said your name right, Joseph. He's from Garfield, New Jersey. He says, "Dear Don, I love your podcast and what you're doing with Lester's feet. Hats off to you guys and God bless. I have a couple of quick questions for you. You talk about human intrusion, but each year you run your master course at your property. How do you manage this? I'm just worried about doing more harm than good by doing habitat work in the spring and summer months. Second question, I know you use real-world Miscanthus for screening. How do you structure it in your fields? By this, I mean, how would you use the Miscanthus in your fields to create bedding? Third question. If I have 60 acres of woods and 40 acres of mixed habitat, brush, food plots, etc., and I couldn't cut the trees, how would you set it up as a sanctuary? Thank you for your help. Sincerely, Joseph DeMarzik. Well, I hope I can remember all these questions.
I'll tee them up here for you.
All right. The first is the master class. Joseph, we do not go in the sanctuary at the master class. Never have. I also have about 35 acres of switchgrass bedding cover on my farm. We do not go into that either. We do put a little bit of pressure on the farm, but it's totally outside of the sanctuary and bedding cover. So that has not been an issue at this point. Next question was
if Don affected his deer hunting with this event, he would not do it. I can assure you of that.
There would not be a class, period.
But we basically bounce around the peripheral of it. You got to remember that his sanctuary is in the middle of open ag, so we can bounce around and walk out in the ag field and completely walk around the center core without going in. So guess you just have to come and attend the class to really appreciate it. The second question he asks is Miscanthus for screening. How do you use it as structure?
Well, the Miscanthus, it can be used a lot of ways in that switchgrass. And one way is I'll plant a giant X out in the field, and the deer like to bed in the pockets that are created with that X. Also, you just plant a line of it from the edge of if you've got a tree stand along the edge of that field and you want deer to exit that switchgrass right there by your stand, you can just start there at that edge and just plant a strip of it or a line or a row right out into the heart of that switchgrass field, and those deer will kind of follow that taller Miscanthus right out to the edge.
If you're looking for a way to funnel the deer, or provide that, I don't know what it is about just that solid wall behind them that they like to get back up in. It could be wind, it could be security, I'm not sure, but there's just a ton of ways that you can use this product. A lot of people misconceive it for actual bedding product, but it's not. It's for a screen or a structure.
I will say that Jay Gingrich, a Gingrich Tree Farm, one of our sponsors, gave me a fantastic idea here the other day. See him at church every Sunday, and usually we're late getting into church because we're talking. But Jay's gonna and his brother-in-law John Jess are going to plant a field, and they're going to use rows of Miscanthus throughout that field, but they're going to space them rows about 6 feet apart. It's going to be a single row, and they're going to drop these rhizomes about every 6 feet. So there's going to be clusters or clumps of Miscanthus, and when they get it done, then they're going to drill the switchgrass right on top of it. So within the switchgrass, there's going to be these random clumps of Miscanthus throughout. I think it's a great idea. I'm just trying to figure out where I'm going to do it at as soon as I can find a place. So
basically, it's
another way.
When you think of it like a fish pond, he's basically creating all this structure that habitat can get up in and get protected or feel safe throughout the entire field instead of just a line, just like we would in the bottom of a pond that we're trying to hold fish in.
Right.
Yeah,
and, you know that Miscanthus has got stalks like bamboo, so the wind and snow is never going to blow it over, and it'll probably help hold up the switchgrass to some degree as well. So I got to hand it to Jay.
The beauty of that idea is, though, when you go to burn it, you burn it all at the same time, the same way. You know, right. You don't have to worry about trees and that kind of stuff getting burned up in it. You just torch the whole thing and let her go.
You know, when I was in Ohio this week, I drove by some fields of Miscanthus that they must have been planted for biofuel or something. I mean, they were large fields that were solid Miscanthus, and you could actually see that they were planted in rows, but I just didn't. It didn't appear to me that there was much deer sign around those fields. It's probably a little too thick, I would guess. But I think the idea Jay had is just fantastic. And
Yeah, it's a
like
good
I said,
idea.
I'm gonna figure out a place to do that myself.
Well, fantastic. The third question was, if I have 60 acres of woods and 40 acres of mixed habitat, brush, food plots, etc., and I couldn't cut the woods, how would I set up a sanctuary?
Well, if you can't do the woods, you can't do anything as far as affecting the cover. The best thing you can do is stay out of it. Freedom of human intrusion. Um, freedom of human intrusion is more important than having a thick woods. If you've got a thick woods but you've got human pressure in it, that's not near as good as an open woods with no human intrusion. So just totally stay out of it.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you for your question, Joseph. We'll be getting you a t-shirt out shortly. And at this time, let's break away and for a message from our primary sponsor, Osseo Gear.
Osseo Gear introduces a premium line of bow hunting gear that is unmatched, pairing nature's finest camouflage with the best technological innovations. Osseo Gear brings whitetail bow hunters the gear they need to be the best at their craft. The unique camouflage mimics the intricate feather pattern of North America's greatest predatory creatures. Designed for invisibility, built for comfort, and engineered for function. Visit OsseoGear.com. That's ASIO Gear.com to start shopping. Osseo Gear, prepare to be invisible.
All right. Well, we want to thank Joe Miles. Are we going to see Joe down in North Carolina? Is he going to be at that show?
I think there's a pretty good chance he thought he might be able to get away.
All right. So maybe if he's there, I'll shoot him a text tonight or tomorrow. Maybe we can get him up on stage with us for part of the podcast on Saturday. That would be real fun.
Yeah,
So
awesome.
we want to thank Joe as a deer killing machine, and he has come out with what I think is the best camo on the market, not only pattern, but made for whitetail tree stand hunters. So let's move on to our second question from a guy named Josh Pretzer out in Kansas. And
I think we know Josh, don't we?
For the record, Josh is the one that I talked to earlier about. He was originally the guy that said that there was no difference between ag seed and food plot seed until our mutual friend Aaron Morgan convinced him to try it one time. So
Josh is a believer now.
Josh is a believer.
So Josh is from Elmdale, Kansas, and his question is, or submission, Don, you recommend large food plots quite often on the podcast. On a recent episode, I believe it was the Shipshawana live cast, you mentioned making a food plot not wider than your comfortable shooting range as to keep the odds in your favor. I believe I remember that correctly. If I don't, please correct me. But my question is, how do you keep plots narrow to keep the deer in good shooting range, but still achieve a large food plot up to 10 acres and maybe more? Blessings to you and Terry. Well, Josh, that's a good question. Actually, I was asked that a couple times at Shipshawana by a couple people. So that's the reason I selected your question, because if that many people are asking, they probably didn't understand, or I didn't do a very good job explaining. So, and what I'm going to explain here, I actually just did this in Ohio on a couple properties this week. I like those long, narrow plots, but depending on the property and the deer population in that area, a lot of times you need more acreage than you can get in a small, narrow plot. So what we'll do is create a large plot, but we will neck it down in several places, or not several places, but in places where we're going to put a stand or a tower blind. And so, the plot may be, who knows, 50 or 100 yards wide even. The plot where the Nutri-Crave Corn was on that I was talking about earlier in this podcast is just such a plot. It's every bit of 100 yards wide in most spots, but there's a couple of places where there's blinds that we've really necked it down, where that blind pushes it up to probably within 20 yards of the edge. and we'll plant Miscanthus in a V-shaped pattern behind that blind, for access to the blind into that plot, and then put a fence right in that Miscanthus, and that Miscanthus is really growing up within a fence, and it'll push those deer, it'll funnel them right in front of that blind. It just works fantastic. Probably another one of them things I need to do a video on, Terry, but that's how you get away with having a narrow plot, but adding enough acreage to feed the deer that you've got on your property.
Yeah, I don't mean to sound this like it's a cop-out answer, but we get a lot of different questions from a lot of different places, and we try to answer them, and then people take it literally across the board. And I think the narrative for the question about long and narrow and lots of acres is we were on the topic of these micro plots and doing these little bitty plots in different places. And I think you would say if you could draw up a property from a blank piece of paper, you'd rather have two pieces of bedding and a long, narrow food plot. But a lot of times we just have to get more acres. So I think people take it just a touch too literally. The shape of your food plot is extremely important. It might be long and narrow, but be in a U shape. It might be long and narrow and have zigzags in it. It might be long and narrow for a short period of time out of a bedding area and then open up to a big field. But I think what we were trying to get across is create those pinch points, create those short and narrow spots to where you're getting them within bow range if you're a bow hunter. So
this new property I just bought in Ohio, well, one of them, the bigger one, is it's going to have a long, narrow 10-acre food plot on it. And we're actually going to produce a video about this property from start to finish. And, the viewer is going to get to see, how we're getting 10 acres out of a long, narrow plot.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you for your question, Josh. We appreciate it. Let's move on. Let's do a quick update about Lester's Feet raffle. Can we do that real quick?
Yeah.
As everybody knows, we announced we received our gaming permit. If you or your company wants to donate and put something into the raffle as a prize, we need to know this week. I am basically cutting this off this week. So we've been so blessed, Don. There's multiple enclosed hunting blinds. We had a John Deere tractor with loader donated last week. The two big prizes are obviously the new Chevrolet truck donated by Victory Chevrolet and Midwest Land Group. There is a material package for a 30 by 40 pole structure building that's in the raffle. It's like $28,000 for this post frame building, and just so many different prizes. And the thing I love about it is it's really diverse. So while this started with just the hunting community, there's different things that have nothing to do with hunting in there. So we hope that it will drive a lot of ticket sales. Our plan is to open up those ticket sales in early to mid-March. As most people can imagine, it gets very complicated when we get this many prizes, but we will be able to order tickets online or mail in checks for tickets. So we will have the opportunity to do both. But as it stands right now, Don, we're pushing like $135,000, $140,000 of prizes in this raffle. My family's most excited because we got a call from a high-end dog breeder yesterday from a real high pedigree that is donating a pick of the litter for a future litter of one of his dogs that he sells for about $3,000. So, really? So my family wants to buy tickets.
I was going to say my wife will be buying tickets to that.
Yep. So,
what breed of dog is it?
I believe labs. So, real awesome. High-end pedigree dogs. And so we're blessed. When we got the phone call, it was really funny. They said they wanted to donate a puppy. And I thought, oh boy, who keeps the puppy until the drawing? So I was like, Robin Higgins, we have your first assignment to the Lester's Feet Foundation is babysit a puppy. But we made the
is
phone
this dog
call.
breeder in Indiana?
This dog breeder is in Indiana, and I think you know him very well.
Yeah. Fine young man. He's a fine young man, no doubt about it.
He is.
He
But
probably wants to remain anonymous, so I won't mention his name. But
yeah, but I know you're proud, so we'll leave it at that. But he called this week, and we worked it out to where it's going to be a future litter, so the person who wins it can schedule that. The big question that we're getting that I don't want to spend a lot of time addressing is there's going to be a lot of prizes in here that a lot of people might win that can't accept. You know, there might be an Amish family that wins the truck, or there might be folks in the city that win the pole barn. It might be a family that can't take the dog. We're going to have the means. Our foundation is set up very strategically to where money goes back to families however we can. And in good conscience, our board has decided not to offer cash alternatives for the prizes. So I think the reason that we're all donating and we're buying tickets is really to help families. So if you can't accept a prize, what we're offering as part of this is you can basically win the prize and donate it back to the foundation, where we find a family that can use it or benefit from it. And we'll talk more about that later, but I want people to know that the goal of this isn't going to be a gambling, thing where we buy tickets and have the shot at winning a truck, but then getting $50,000 cash back instead. We're doing this to help families. So if for some reason somebody wins something and they can't take it for different reasons, we're going to have a mechanism to use that still as a way to be a blessing to other people. So I hope people understand that. But this thing's going crazy. We're going to play a quick video through our Matthews spot for Lester's Feet. For the Dow family out of Illinois right now. This is a little bit of a tough story. Usually I have a family get on and do a quick videos and update. They're struggling right now with caring for their little boy. So unfortunately, you guys are going to listen to me introduce the family. And I didn't tell you about this, Don, but we talk about our faith at the end of this video. We're just all going to take a minute and pray together for this little boy. So I hope you enjoy this segment presented by Matthews from Lester's Feet.
Today I want to introduce you to the Dow family from Illinois. A listener to the Chasing Giants podcast told us about this family in the fall of 2021. We reached out to the family to learn more and immediately fell in love with their family and their story. This family is currently navigating the care of their child, so instead of asking them to worry about putting a video together, I just wanted to share the story, introduce you to them, to know who you could pray for today. In April of 2019, this young couple, Andy and Beth, along with their son Grayson, were surprised with the news that a baby boy was coming. While it was really not that long ago, to this family, it seemed like an eternity. The family welcomed this little baby boy named Waylon into the world, and life seemed so perfect. But on April 15th of 2020, their world would come to a screeching halt. This otherwise healthy, chubby, bubbly baby boy was diagnosed with a form of sarcoma. What started out thinking that this little bump on his eyelid was a sty turned into a life-altering event in just a matter of 3 weeks. The preliminary biopsy was negative and the tumor was removed. The family thought that they were in the clear. They thought they had dodged a bullet and went home thinking how lucky they were. But Andy and Beth took him to his appointment thinking they were just going for a routine checkup. But little did they know their life was getting ready to hit a brick wall going 100 miles an hour. This C word, especially for a parent to learn of their child, just heartbreaking. Like many parents, Andy and Beth would do anything to trade places with him. Staying strong for the family, Andy and Beth held things together as they started navigating and receiving treatment in St. Louis. They were just normal parents of a healthy baby boy, but in just a matter of 24 hours, they became cancer parents. At just 4 months old, this family started a journey. A normal baby milestone might be sitting up, rolling over, crawling, saying mama, dada, was quickly replaced with milestones as he's getting his chemo for 3 months. Normal family activities were divided into these intervals because that's when he gets his scans to make sure the cancer hasn't returned. It's truly an indescribable fear. On June 7th, 2021, almost 2-year-old Waylon finally rang that bell. His cancer was in remission, and the big sigh of relief and hopelessness of the future to come, the family, Andy, Beth, and Grayson, became busy campaigning for the future, starting to raise money for other families that had gone through what they had. But later in September, Beth's intuition and an MRI scan showed Waylon's cancer had returned. Thankfully, it was caught early, again, and remained contained to the eye orbit. The family heard some words they never wanted to hear. Your child's cancer is back. Immediately, Beth began to research and consult with others to learn about potential treatments outside of St. Louis Children's. She reached out to a few other hospitals for second opinions, and after what seemed like to be divine intervention, it led them to a very fast second opinion turnaround. The families quickly switched gears and decided that the hospital in New York was the right place for Waylon's treatment. With the future ahead calling for many trips to New York, medical bills, lodging, meals, time off work, this is when God connected the Lester's Feet Foundation to the family. With the help of the donors, the monthly expenses back home were taken care of while Andy and Beth traveled to New York to continue treatment and surgery. In late 2021, Waylon had a surgery to remove his eye and his eye socket. This life-changing procedure felt like a couple steps backwards, but in the long run was his best path forward. After allowing time to heal from this procedure, the chemo would start back again, and the battle would continue. Overall, he's had a rough go of it since starting chemo. They even had to visit the emergency room on Christmas morning and did not return home till New Year's Eve. As of February 2022, the family is just simply exhausted. Andy and Beth have done what every cancer mom and dad would do. That's put their child first. Older brother Grayson, who is now 12, has been awesome with the situation, but we know it's wearing on him as well. This upcoming 9 months of chemo has started out extremely rough. Although the eye area is healing, the battling of fevers, ear infections, and other sickness has resulted in a lot of time admitted into the hospital while trying to start this gruesome 9 months of chemo. When Lester's Feet reaches out to check on Andy and Beth, they always say they're doing fine, they're just struggling with the situation. Never wanting to draw attention to themselves, they always ask us to help spread the word about childhood cancer. While Lester's Feet's going to continue to stand behind the family financially when they need it, God, we come to you today, heartbroken, worried, concerned, even angry that this dreaded disease affects so many little ones. We know that your grace, your mercy, through your Son Jesus, provides the assurance that one day there'll be no pain, there'll be no fear, there'll be no risk. We know that through your Son Jesus that we have the assurance of an eternal, happy place with no sickness. But for right now, we just lift this family, Andy, Beth, Grayson, and Waylon, up to you. We ask for healing, we ask for comfort, and most of all, Father, we ask you to lay your hands over them, draw them closer together, help this little boy fight this disease, and grow up living like a normal boy would. Together, right now, praying, Father, we pray that not only for Waylon, but all the other families that we come in contact with, watch over them and protect them. In Jesus' name, amen.
All right, Don. Well, we talked at the beginning of the podcast what this podcast has turned into, and I never thought that it would be a situation where we could actually lead a prayer for a family, but I don't know why not.
Now, and this family needs it, no doubt about it.
All right. So why don't we move on? We have a question from Brandon Wolf that we're going to put up on the screen. This is the third question of the night. I believe Brandon is from Pennsylvania, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Brandon, he sends in a question about every week, and I think this is about the second or third one we've selected of his. So he comes up with some pretty good ones. And Brandon's from Rice's Landing, Pennsylvania. He says, "Hey, Don and Terry, big fan of the podcast. Don, out of all the habitat projects you have done on your farm, what is the biggest learning experience that you have had throughout these different projects? God bless. Let's go, Brandon." Well, Brandon, without a doubt, the biggest lesson for me has been how important freedom of human intrusion is on a property. You can do any project you want, but if you put too much human intrusion on your property, you could make the best property in North America for whitetails, best habitat anyone has ever seen. But human intrusion can ruin that property and make it totally worthless. So that without a doubt is the biggest lesson that I've learned with all my habitat projects on my farm.
Yeah, and that's saying a lot because that's 30 years of trial and error and things working, some things not working, but sometimes less is more, especially the closer we get into the spring. I think people just try to do a little bit too much. I think we talked about it. I think we talked about it in Shipshawana that anybody can ruin a great property, but few can turn a bad property into a good one.
That's for sure.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to take just a quick break and talk to our friends at buyafarm.com about some upcoming auctions that they have. The real estate market is booming. There's not a lot of listings out there, and online auctions are becoming a big tool for people to use if they're wanting to market their properties. So one of the owners of BioFarm is going to spend a couple minutes explaining how this service can be offered by buyafarm.com.
Hey everyone, this is Terry Peer from the Chasing Giants podcast. Welcome to the buyafarm.com segment where I'm joined with Wayne Keller. And today we're going to take a little bit different approach and talk a little bit about the auction services that BioFarm offers. And Wayne Keller's on the phone with us tonight. Wayne, you just got off of an auction and have a couple coming up, but I want you to talk a little bit about these services that BioFarm can offer for people.
Well, we do traditional listings and auctions both, and over the past 2 years, it's been trending more and more to the online auctions. I think it's been 2 years now since we've done a live auction, and we're finding out that people like the online auctions better than they do taking the time to drive and sit down at an auction. They'd rather bid online, and they're doing very well. I just got off one just a few minutes ago that went very well, and we've got several coming up right now. And right now I've got a 419 acres of wooded property on the Mississippi River that is just right across from Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Some of it north of the bridge and some of it south of the bridge. That's not on the internet yet, but that'll be coming up shortly. That'll be in April. I've got a small piece that joins Forbes Lake. That's a pretty little recreational piece. Got a cabin on it that a guy could use for hunting property, but it's only 11 acres. We've got a piece coming up in Missouri here this weekend. Well, no, it's Thursday of next week that we've got a 112 acre piece, 166, and those are damn good hunting properties as well as cattle properties. They're pasture, fenced pasture, but good hunting as well, turkey and whitetail.
Right. Well, Wayne, I have a general question for you, and this is just out of curiosity. If someone is interested in, there's people who inherit estates, and then there's people that know it's just a good time to sell because of the market. They're not sure whether to do a traditional listing or an auction. the best thing to do is reach out to an expert at Buy a Farm to help navigate that. Not only can you provide the service, but you could also evaluate someone's property and assets to kind of steer them into what would be the best decision for them, right?
Right. Some properties just aren't good candidates for auctions and others are, and we'd be glad to look at it, help you make that decision. And then another thing, too, is we're starting to offer a new service in our auctions, and that is that multi-par online, which if you've got property that's got several pieces is a real good way to go, because there's a lot of times a buyer doesn't want to buy just a small tract. They want to be sure they get 2 or 3 of them or none, and those multi-pars helps them keep it together that way, and it's just a good way to go. And the online ones just work a lot smoother and nicer than the old in-person ones did on the multi-pars.
Well, I think the other thing about the online auction is you probably get a larger demographic because there's only so many people that's going to drive, and bad weather days stand out and bid on it. You can get a lot of people from the comfort of their own home all over the country or even world participating in it.
And tonight is a prime example because we've got ice everywhere. I haven't been out today because it's so bad. I figured, what the heck, I'm staying home. And we had an auction tonight. We had a lot of bidders on it. We had bidders from up in the central part of the state on it. We had bidders from the local area down around Benton, Illinois. We had bidders from Tennessee, just all over the place.
Yeah,
and
I remember
those people would not have taken the time to go to the auction.
I remember growing up when my dad would take me to farm auctions, where we look at equipment or tools or anything like that. We'd always go to the ones that had bad weather because the old wives' tale or theory was the worse the weather, the less people show up and the cheaper it would come. And I don't know if that's ever true or not, but it takes the weather out of the equation anyway.
Well, with farm auctions, we've always figured just the opposite. We always hope for bad weather because it's good weather. The guy's going to stay out there and keep working. If it's bad weather, he'll come to the auction.
There you go.
And we do our auctions most of the time at 8 o'clock at night when there's more people off work that can then sit down and take the time to watch them and bid on them. Well, I have a lot of people that call me up and say, hey, my Thursday night entertainment is sitting and watching the auctions on Buy a Farm.
The thing I like about the organization, though, is, when you trust a company with your property to help you navigate what the best decision is, and you can do either one and help evaluate and direct the client. So I know real estate's really hot right now, and listings are down because of the turnover. So why don't you take just a minute and plug how people, not only who are looking to buy but potentially sell, can get a hold of you and have Buy a Farm help them out with their property?
Yeah, well, I'm Wayne Keller. I'm the founding partner, and I can be reached at 800-357-4020, or you can call the main office at 618. Let's see, what is it here? No, it's 800-443-1998. Or you can go on the internet and pick out one of the other agents and give them a call. There's several of us on there.
All right. So not only if you're looking to buy but looking to sell, give Buy a Farm a chance to work with you and recommend the best package that's right for what your objective is. Wayne, thank you again for being on the podcast this week. We've had a couple live events the last couple weeks, so haven't had you on. It's good to have you back and focus on what Buy a Farm can do for our listeners. Thanks for your time.
All right. Hey, take care, Terry. Bye.
Okay, well, we want to thank Buy a Farm for their sponsorship and continued support of the podcast. They're going to continue to bring some different things each week, not just properties, but maybe some financing tips, maybe some revenue resources from CRP or lease ground. So we look forward to those other spots brought to us by Buy a Farm, and thank them for their support. Let's move on to listener submitted question number 4 for the night, Don.
Okay, this question comes from Jared Gilliman from Pocahontas, Illinois. Jared says, hello, Don and Terry. Hope all is well. I have been watching all of the podcasts and real world segments. It's time to get real. I was listening to another podcast and heard someone talking about a product called Milorganite. It is said to help with browse pressure on soybean plots when they are in the critical early stages. I was just wondering what your thoughts were on this situation. Thank you, and have safe travels to all your shows in the near future. Well, Jared, the product you're talking about is called Milorganite, spelled Milo instead of Malo. Milorganite is actually a fertilizer product made from human waste, from sewage.
Lots of Code Browns.
Yeah. Code Brown in its finest form, fertilizer. And I bet you can get it. It comes in bags. You can get it at like Home Depot or places like that. It doesn't smell as bad as what you think it would, but it does have an odor to it.
Would this be considered human intrusion?
That's a good question. Well, I'm going to guess there's probably a few deer hunters that don't even use it in pellet form. They use it raw. You made me lose my train of thought, Terry. I know. When it really works the best is, on a young soybean plot, when those soybeans are just coming up and they're in that little 2-leaf stage. It'll help keep the deer out of your plots. The thing of it is, a rain will pretty much wash it away, especially if it's a good heavy rain. I can share one experience. A friend of mine, he used some one time, and he used a lot of it, and the deer would not eat his soybeans. That when the plants matured that fall and dried down, that winter the deer would not touch his soybeans, and apparently he used so much his soybeans tasted like crap. But it will work to some degree. You just got to be careful with it, and it's not real cheap either. But
I think it's a quick fix for. Well, I don't want to overgeneralize a comment here, but to do soybeans the right way, you got to have enough acreage of it. And people want to plant soybeans and just don't have a big enough plot. And they try these little different things to try to bridge the gap. At some point, you just need to pick a different product that can withstand the browse pressure. But I think one of the best tools that you taught me years ago is waiting for the alternatives to basically green up and become palatable before you plant. So whether that's the alfalfa greening up to where it disperses those deer onto alfalfa, clover, or the neighbor's ag field of soybeans, letting those go about 2 weeks ahead to disperse. If your soybeans are the first things to germinate, you'll have every deer there because they've been hungry for quite a few months.
Yeah, what I've found works the best for me is a no-till, using the Genesis planter. If you follow me on social media at all, you've seen a picture of my tractor with the sprayer on the front where the bucket goes. My bucket detaches, so I custom made a sprayer that goes up there. That's the same width as my drill behind, so I spray and plant at the same time. And a lot of times I'm planting or spraying a cover crop of basically deadly dozen from the fall before. The rye and the wheat and such in that deadly dozen comes back in the spring. I'll let it get up 6-8 inches tall, spray it, and plant the soybeans into it at the same time. So as that soybean is germinating and starting to grow, that rye or wheat or whatever is dying off, and that soybean, when it's in the 2-leaf stage, is kind of hid down in that dead vegetation, and the deer don't find it near as well, and it'll really cut down on the browse pressure.
And turkeys and pheasants, I know you have just as much pheasant damage as I do turkeys. Yeah, they go and they pluck that first germinated seed right up out of the ground and eat it. So just a couple different tips for those, even if you don't have a drill but do have a drill. It's a great way to kind of mask and prolong any browse pressure that you're going to get. Well, I want to make a couple quick announcements. We got a 5th question that we're going to talk about, but you have some announcements about this coming week as it relates to North Carolina.
Yeah, I'm going to be at the Dixie Deer Classic. What's the dates? March 4th, 5th, and 6th, I believe. Next Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I've got seminars scheduled each day. I'll have my 3 200-inch bucks there, and Terry will be there with me doing a live Chasing Giants podcast where we're going to take questions from the audience. That will be on Saturday. Hope to see everyone there.
I was asked to attend this out of the gate and do a podcast, and I had to decline because it's hard for me to get away from work. But as luck would have it, what day was it? I texted you and I said, you're not going to believe this.
Just a day or two ago.
And I actually got scheduled for a work meeting on Friday morning in North Carolina. So I'm going to be a couple hours away. So I won't be there for the Friday seminar, but should be there Friday evening, all day Saturday. And then I'm going to hopefully stay for a couple hours on Sunday before I head back. I have to get back. But looking forward to it. I apologize to all the people that said we weren't going to do a podcast there because I wouldn't be in town, and that's changed. But I hope a lot of people come out to not only see. Are you going to do the nutrition seminar on Friday? Guys, this is a fantastic seminar to understand the complete nutrition requirements of a whitetail and what we can do differently to benefit herd health. And then obviously the podcast, these live podcasts are getting quite comical and very interesting because, it allows us to talk about what people want to talk about, not just some presentation we put together. So,
right.
And then real quick here, I got a picture of our good friend, Dr. Bronson Strickland on the screen right now. You have an announcement about our upcoming master classes.
Yeah, the master classes are going to start March 10th with Dr. Strickland, and he'll be here for one on the 12th as well. Those classes were the first ones to sell out, but there was a couple of people in each one that had scheduling conflicts, and they had to switch to a different class. So if anyone, and those other classes are now all full. So the only openings now are Dr. Strickland's classes, which were the first to sell out. If anybody's out there listening, we got room for 2 people in each of the March 10th or the March 12th class. If you're interested, get a hold of me as soon as possible. I'm sure somebody's going to nab those up, but we can take 2 for each of those 2 dates.
All right, I got 2 questions that you're not going to answering because people are going to flood my social media and email to ask you the same question. So we're just going to get it out of the way here so I don't have to deal with it.
Okay.
If I am scheduled and reserved for another class the next 2 weekends, can I switch and go take this spot instead of the later weekends? You know that's gonna happen, buddy. You know it's gonna happen.
Whoever gets a hold of me first is gonna get those spots. If it's someone
Good answer. But folks, you got to understand Don is going to be spending a lot of hours in the truck this coming week. So in the next day or 2, if you want these 2 spots, you better get a hold of Don right now. And put your name on these things, because if we get into Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you're going to be on the road to North Carolina, and it's going to be impossible to keep up with all of this. So if you're interested in doing it, the folks that had these 2 spots had a scheduling conflict. They're now open. We don't have to fill them, but if somebody wants them, we'll let them in. I think we're going to do a live podcast on the night of the 11th. Every Friday night, I think we're going to do a live podcast before the Saturday master class. I think that's the plan, isn't it?
Right. Yep.
All right. Okay. Well, let's move to our 5th question of the episode. This one comes from Corey out in Iowa.
Corey Bears from Rockwell, Iowa. He says, Don and Terry, thanks for the Chasing Giants podcast. Keep up the excellent work for the Whitetail Nation. Why does CWD continue to be such a problem in captive deer breeding facilities? Studies in Iowa and Wisconsin have shown 80% plus of the animals have tested CWD positive in a captive deer herd once an outbreak is discovered. Some deer showing symptoms and some not. Wanted to get your thoughts on why CWD is such a problem in captive deer facilities, even when the animals are bred for some of the very best genetics and given a top-end feed, mineral, and supplemental program. Thanks again.
Saved the last one to get you fired up, didn't we?
I did. Yeah. This is the one.
This was actually the fourth question, and I screwed up on the outline and moved it to number 5 to end it with a bang.
Well, the captive deer industry, in my opinion, has gotten a raw end of the deal on being blamed for CWD. And here's why I think so. CWD has popped up in states where captive deer are not even allowed. There are no captive deer in some states, and yet CWD is there. I think here's what I would really like the public to think about. Every listener, I want you to think about this. If the government did not tell you about CWD and COVID, would you even know either one existed? Think about it. If the government, when you blame the captive deer farm, and I'm neutral on that topic. You know, I'm not for shooting pin deer myself. If somebody wants to and they want to be honest about it, fine. What I have a problem with is people doing it and lying about it and saying they did it in the wild. But I think they're getting the raw end of the deal here. I think the government, some people within the government, especially game agencies, do not like captive deer. And that's a quick scapegoat. Let's blame it on the captive deer. And it makes about as much sense as taking a COVID vaccine that everybody knows doesn't work. The people giving you the shot know it doesn't work. The government knows it doesn't work, but you do it anyway. I think the data is skewed to promote a position. It's not unbiased. It's biased to promote the position that the government wants you to take on it. They want you to hate captive deer farmers. They want you to blame captive deer farmers for CWD. They want you to hate people that don't wear a mask too. They want you to hate people that don't take a vaccine. You're endangering the rest of the world, and you can they just mirror each other. It's crazy how they mirror each other.
What do you think about the Russians?
The Russians? Well, I think they're a heck of a lot smarter than Joe Biden. That's what I think about them. You want me to get on that topic? Because I got a rant on that one too. But
have it.
You know what's going on here, people? It's very simple. If anybody listening thinks this world is ever going to get better, you're only fooling yourself. What we're seeing happen is the Bible playing out right in front of our eyes. What is it, Ezekiel? I think it's Ezekiel is playing out. I mean, what's going to happen is Russia and China are going to start picking off little countries. Russia's taking down Ukraine. China's going after Taiwan. We're sitting over here with Joe Biden babbling nonsense. You know, the United States is not even there in the end in the Bible. The United States is not there. We're going to get wiped out at some point, and probably sooner rather than later. It looks like the way it's going. But anybody listening that thinks that the world is going to get better, we're ever going to go back, I got news for you. Today is the best day for the rest of your life. It's all downhill from here. This world's falling apart. It's told in the Bible. We just need to accept it and be ready when Jesus comes back.
Yeah, there's two things we can be ready for, and that's Jesus and helping our neighbor. Outside of that, doesn't matter. So we encourage you to think hard about your relationship with God and also your relationship with those around you. Like Don said earlier, the best way to be blessed is be a blessing to someone else. So we appreciate everybody's time. Don, if you got any closing words, why don't you go ahead and take us out for tonight's episode? We'll see you next week at the Dixie Deer Classic in North Carolina.
My closing words, don't trust the government. God bless everyone.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Osseo Camo, Buy a Farm Real Estate Company, 360 Hunting Blinds, Victory Chevrolet, Real World Wildlife Products, Matthews Archery, Novix Tree Stands, Gingerich Tree Farm, WildlifeFarming.com, Quiet Cat, and Vortex Optics. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.